Welcome to Root Cause Medicine, presented by Spirit of Health, transforming lives through real health solutions. Welcome, everyone. This is Vaughn Lawrence with Spirit of Health. Welcome to the Root Cause Medicine podcast. I am here with a very special guest, Jane Barlow. So welcome, Jane, to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here. Usually we do stuff over Zoom, and here we are in person.
Yeah,
amen. Which is the best.
I'm thankful.
Me too.
She flew all the way from Salt Lake City just to hang out with us.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. So today we're going to talk about the power of herbal medicine. So just as a quick intro, I'm a naturopathic doctor, been working with people for 15 years, had a retail business and a practitioner business, and I've just seen the power of herbal medicine help so many people. And I know you have too.
Yeah.
So I'd love to just start out with having you share with the audience like your story of just how you got involved in all this, because it's a fascinating story and I think people need to hear it.
Yeah, I think it's really uncommon. And I realize that as I have grown through adulthood and raised my kids and my grandkids now, you realize what a gift you have when you grow up like I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in the 60s and 70s with a dad who was a medicinal botanist. So we were learning about plants and their properties just because that was what my dad's passion was.
Mm-hmm.
And when my dad met my mom in college, my mom said to my dad, "I want a dozen kids." And this is while they were dating. And my dad's like, "All right, let's do this."
Wow.
So they had 11 and adopted 3.
Wow.
So I grew up second oldest in this big family that was, full of just all kinds of ages. And as a teenager, there were preschoolers and grade schoolers and babies. And, this was just the way I grew up. And my dad and my mom had things all over the house, like herbs infusing in oils and tinctures being cured. We had a huge garden, and going to the doctor was just not something we did.
Right.
And I think also growing up in the 60s and 70s, it makes myself sound like an old person when I say, "Oh, life was simpler then," but it really was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you grow up a little bit off the grid, even though we dipped in and out of homeschool, my mom would homeschool us for a while. And then she'd get tired, like if she had, 2 or 3 toddlers and a baby to take care of.
That's real.
She'd send us all back to school for a while.
Right.
And so, I think as a teenager, I started getting really embarrassed of what my dad did, because it was just, and then because I'm the second to the oldest, it'd be like they'd gather us all together and announce another pregnancy. And I'd just be like, "Oh my gosh, are you guys serious? There are 10 of us. What are you doing?" So of course now as adults, my youngest brother is 42. So we're all way grown up, and we're so grateful for each other.
Yeah.
And we're so grateful for what my dad brought into our life as far as the power of plant medicine, because you really, you start to see how other people were raised, and that wasn't their normal, and that wasn't something that just comes second nature. Because for me, I had my babies, and I was just like, "All right, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to take this herb, we're going to make this."
Yeah.
So this was just really, really natural for me, where I've seen other people want to go into the natural realm, especially these last few years, and it's intimidating.
Right.
Because it's unfamiliar. People lack the confidence and the courage to start using herbal medicine on this level. But I don't think it has to be complicated, because our bodies are designed for wellness. And I think, it's interesting because all of my siblings, myself included, once we got out of the house, we discovered fast food and junk food, and we're just like, we were so denied. Yeah, we were denied all this stuff, and I started having like digestive problems and constipation, and it was just like, and then I got back on track. But growing up with a dad who taught us about plant medicine on the level he did, like I was telling you earlier with your team this morning, we'd be driving somewhere, and my dad would want to identify a plant. And like one of my best memories is, back when we grew up, there was no seatbelt laws, and there were tons of us. So
Right.
we'd drive to church in a kind of a smallish car, and there'd be the bigger kids in the back seat with a smaller kid on their lap, and sometimes even another kid on their lap. So we would be stuffed into
Yeah.
our cars. And I remember, I think I was in a 5th or 6th grade, and we're driving to church, and my dad saw a plant that he wanted to show us. It was in the perfect bloom or whatever. And so he pulls over to the side of the road. We're all in our Sunday best. We get out, and he's teaching. We were there probably 5 minutes. But he's like, this is the part of the plant you use. This is the time of day you collect it. Look at the flowers are in perfect bloom. This is how you can identify it by the shape of the leaves, and all the dew has dissipated off. So we're learning all this, and then it's like, oh, we got to get back going. So we pile back in, and all of us are these dirty little kids now that we've been stomping by the side of the road. So
That's awesome.
that kind of, in a nutshell, yeah.
I love that. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for sharing kind of a little bit how you grew up. It's different than most of us grew up.
I know.
It's very different than how I grew up, but I think it's amazing. But you're talking about, plant medicine, and you think of the world we're in today, and it wasn't too long ago that a lot of people grew up more that way, right? People lived out in the country, people lived out in the prairies, people didn't have a doctor, a hospital on every corner, people had to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like that was the ancient way, so to speak, right? Of how people lived and had
100%.
medicine.
100%.
And then now I feel like in the last 150 years, I feel like the world's been a little bit hijacked, would you say?
Oh, or a lot hijacked.
A lot hijacked. And so, yeah, I mean, how do you think, like, where the world at right now with what happened for the first 7,000 years of human history, and then how we've been hijacked over the last 150 years of people? And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have been kind of deceived, brainwashed into a system of medicine that probably isn't the best for them or the best for humanity in general.
Sure.
So do you see this movement of people going back to the ancient way, the ancient path?
More than ever.
Yeah.
And I think what stops the majority of masses, because I do think there's a mass of people that are moving to more natural ways, is that it goes back now generational. So you say 100, 150 years. Now we're talking about generations of programming,
Right.
which breaking out of those can be very difficult for people. But I think we need to remember that still now, the majority of the human population on the planet still turns to herbal natural medicine first.
Yes.
So it's not something that's new. It's not something that's scary. It's not something that's, we just have lost touch with connecting to the plants that give us, they give us health. I mean, you look at all of these indigenous people and tribes. In fact, my 3 adopted siblings are Native American. They're Eastern Shoshone, full-blooded.
Oh, that's cool.
All siblings.
Wow.
They were siblings, and then they were adopted into our family. So my dad had a real love for Native American people, their plant medicine, and so he studied that a lot. And my one sibling, Native American sibling, has passed on, but the other 2 are still around. And they've embraced it, along with my dad's teachings, their Native American culture. So you look at every culture, even in the West now that's so modernized with medicine, they have deep wisdom that's passed on from one medicine man to the next medicine man.
Right.
And it's not just, oh, let's learn about something like cayenne or echinacea, which is really good to learn about, but it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper to chronic problems and chronic infections and childbirth and the things that can help humans through the what takes us through life. And I think there's a huge wave, the last probably 4 or 5 years, because I've been doing this a long time, just like you, way before, and people, I've never been busier because people are like, okay, well, wait a minute, something feels off, and they're realizing that they get to take responsibility for what their health expresses and, what their kids and their families' health, especially if you're the nurturer, if you're the mom. I talk to a lot of moms, and it's like they realize, oh, this is something that I can bring into my family and nurture my children.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the power of herbal medicine. I I would say there's probably a lot of myths out there.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's a whole lot of them, but a couple that come to my mind is herbal medicine isn't researched. It's not studied. See, you're laughing already. That would be one thought. And then the other thought would be, well, it doesn't work that good. It's not as strong or as powerful
Yeah.
these other medications we
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
which may or may not have some truth to it, because unfortunately the pharmaceutical drugs are designed to be hard hitting, which is why they cause so many negative side
For
effects,
sure.
right?
Hmm.
So it's not
Hmm.
like they're not strong, because they are,
Hmm.
but so is herbal medicine,
Oh yeah.
and safer. So
Yeah.
what would you say to maybe those two things? One, that herbs aren't researched and studied,
Hmm.
and two, that, well, they're just not, how could they even be as effective as, for, the
Yeah.
drugs we have today, right? Because of all the man-made technology and
Yeah.
advancement, and right?
Right. No, I mean, so the last part is probably easiest to answer first. The thing is most pharmaceuticals have an herbal start to them,
Right.
where you can't patent Mother Nature.
Hmm.
So, like a simple thing, I think most people who started looking at herbal medicine, that most people know about these days is white willow bark. That's
Right.
aspirin,
Right.
and so pharmaceuticals. It's interesting to me how people will trust them before they trust a natural remedy,
Hmm.
not knowing the power. And for me personally, I've experienced the power of herbal medicine firsthand, not just raising my kids, but now my grandkids too. And then as far as the research piece, let me give you a really good example of this, because there is research beyond research, and people just need to start looking and start
Hmm.
digging. And you don't even have to dig that far to find study after study after study of almost any plant or herbal remedy that you would want to look at.
Right.
But one of my favorites, and you're familiar with this now too, is the plant lomatium,
Hmm.
which is a Native American plant. It's got powerful antimicrobial properties, and it was used in the Spanish flu of 1917, 1918 by, there were two Native American tribes near Carson City, Nevada,
Okay.
called the Washoe Indians. And what the government did during the Spanish flu is they assigned a contract physician to every group around the United States so that they could keep track of stats, how many people were getting infected, how many people died. And there was a physician in San Francisco, his name is Dr. E.T. Krebs Sr., and he was assigned to his area that included Carson City, Nevada, and these two Native American tribes. And during the Spanish flu, not one person from either one of these tribes died. Now they got sick,
Hmm.
but what they were using is the root of the lomatium plant,
Wow.
and they was drying in their I don't know if they were teepees or what their
Right.
structures were exactly, but what after the pandemic was over, he took lomatium back to his practice in San Francisco and started studying it.
Mm.
And there was a ton of research that was coming out, and
Yeah.
papers were being published about it because it's so powerful. And there was an article in the Journal of Bacteriology that I actually have a copy of, that I got from my dad, that talks about how powerful lomatium is. And it was I think it was 1942 when this was published. And then what happened shortly after that, penicillin was discovered.
Mm.
Like right around the time when there was
Interesting.
all of this information was being gathered about
Right.
this powerful plant. Then penicillin became what it is,
Right.
and no one wanted to use an old Indian remedy. And that's kind of
Right.
how, because it's like, oh, well, we have this fancy new drug,
Right.
and
The
look,
new is better.
yes, and it
Yeah.
comes out of this fancy building with all these scientists and the labs and all the.
Right.
So I think that as far as herbal medicine being hijacked, I think that's an absolute perfect statement, because you now have the power of this plant that's being highly studied and researched
Right.
in the labs by the scientists.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, it completely goes by the wayside.
Right.
So my dad actually worked with the son of this doctor, Dr. E.T. Krebs Jr., and spent 30 years studying this particular plant, along with other things he did.
Wow.
And the research is all there.
Hmm.
So sometimes what I think is interesting is that the research could be in the experience. Like all
Yes.
of the indigenous people didn't have labs and
Right.
research, and they were writing down the results in their clinical studies. They had proof. The proof was in what happened as they were healing people.
The anecdotal evidence that we
Yeah.
don't act like is real evidence
Right.
because it's just stories or it's just anecdotal or it's just passed down from one
Right.
person to another, but that's not research.
Right.
So how did we get brainwashed into this thought pattern that we have to have these double-blind placebo studies and research,
It's on purpose.
Yeah.
It's on
Exactly.
purpose because
So that you choose them and not,
you're not worth a lot if you're eating clean, eating healthy, and taking herbs to.
not a lot of money in that.
No,
Yeah. It's
no.
unfortunate.
It's this is where people get to opt out.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things. Is just, I just opt out of the system.
Mhm.
I don't make a big fanfare about it. People ask me what I do, I tell them, but
Yeah.
I
And
just
same with us. I've told people so long that my kids are 11, 9, and 7. They've never been to a doctor. They've never taken a pharmaceutical drug. The plan is that they never will.
Yeah.
We'll go to emergency room for a
Right.
serious emergency.
Right.
But if
Yeah.
we know how to take care of ourselves and our families, and that's really our heart is to empower people,
Yeah.
right? So they can take care
Yeah.
of themselves, empower moms especially to take care of their children at home, not have to rely on the doctor. But we're talking about the power of herbal medicine, and you mentioned lomatium.
Yeah.
So, would you say there's a more powerful plant out there overall for human beings that you found than lomatium? That's a big question.
It
but-
is a big question. And here's the thing, I'm extremely biased about this plant.
Yes, true. True.
Because I've used it. My dad formulated a really powerful tincture of it when I was only 14. So next year, it'll be about 50 years that I've been using this plant.
Wow.
So my boys are in their 40s and now my grandkids, and so I raised my kids on it. I have my huge family, so all my siblings raised their kids on it,
Wow.
and now, they all have kids, and so it's just something that we've used so prolifically, and just had results time after time after time after time for decades now.
Right.
And it's so well studied and researched by my dad and myself and my family at this point that I would just say it's a powerful go-to favorite, even though I have other like antimicrobial, powerful antiviral herbs that I love.
Right.
This is a plant that most people have never heard of.
Yes. Most people who would probably listen to this probably have never heard of
Right.
Lomatium dissectum.
Lomatium dissectum multifida.
Multifida.
So the LDM,
Yes.
that stands for multifida, because that's the variation. There are about 13 different species of Lomatium.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so there's actually one species in particular that is endangered, and it grows in Oregon, but it doesn't have the medicinal property. It's just a species of Lomatium that doesn't have even the same properties.
Okay.
So
let's maybe tell people why Lomatium is so powerful. Like we're talking about this amazing plant. Well, what is it? What does it do? How's it helping people?
Yeah, so it's not something that stimulates your immune system. It doesn't go after inflammation or pain. So it's not one of those. It's not really good for your digestive system. But where its power is, like I said, is antimicrobial. So you think about virus, fungus, yeast, candida, and bad bacteria.
Right.
And those are the things that sometimes can take humans down. As far as, if you have a compromised immune system and you get hit with a kind of a gnarly virus, that might be the end of your life.
Yeah,
for some people. I mean, most people, we acclimate to viruses and we build antibodies and all that. But what I love about Lomatium, and this is purely experience, is that it's safe for babies, it's safe for older people. It does cause a very intense one-time detox rash for some people.
Yes, I've experienced it.
Which is, we really front load people with information about that because while it's not a dangerous thing, it is something that's very, very intense to go through. And I told you this earlier. I think it's really awesome when someone who's in a position like you, where you're a practitioner, and you, you said you're glad now that you're done with it.
Yes.
But it was very intense to go through.
It was.
But our bodies heal sometimes by getting a little bit worse before it gets better. And that is the power of this plant, is that a lot of us kind of have things that get stuck. some low-grade chronic things. Like from my research, about 95% of the people on the planet have some type of Epstein-Barr.
Right.
It's very common.
We test for it, so
Common.
I see it.
It's
Yep.
yeah. And from what I've seen Lomatium do, I've seen it cover everything under the Epstein-Barr family. So mono, herpes, all the stuff.
Yeah. Well, it is mono. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
even in the description, they talk about
Right.
Epstein-Barr virus being mono, and people
Right.
don't even know that or think about that.
Right. Instead, they're just embarrassed about, oh, I have
Right.
mono. And it's like, no, it's not anything to be embarrassed about.
No.
You're a human being, you're biology.
Yeah.
And so I think I love a lot of plants, and I'm glad I don't have to pick just one. If I did have to pick just one, it would be that one.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I don't have to, because I have a whole apothecary full of stuff.
I mean, I would say, clinically speaking, seeing a lot of chronically ill people, the people who are struggling the most are struggling with infectious disease.
I
They're-
agree.
If your body's unhealthy
Mm-hmm.
and not functioning properly, you are more susceptible
Yeah.
to viruses and parasites
Yeah.
and mold and bacteria and all of those things. So I think being able to, and you think about prescription drugs,
Mm-hmm.
right? What's the most common prescription drug just handed out time after time after
Antibiotic.
time after time?
Yeah.
Antibiotic.
Yeah.
Even when somebody doesn't need an antibiotic because they don't know what they really have, they just give them an antibiotic anyway because it might help. So
And
clearly
people
people
expect it,
have
though.
infectious disease. Yeah.
They do. People kind of they expect it because that they feel like it's doing something.
Right. They want something that
Yeah.
can help them. But if there was an alternative
Right.
that wasn't a pharmaceutical drug that wouldn't kill all your good flora
Mm-hmm.
and weaken your immune system in the process of helping you. So it's like it's helping you and hurting you at the same time.
Right. Right.
Why not use the wisdom of what God created that would help you but not hurt you?
That's why they're there.
Right.
It's why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, it's like what I see people really hesitate about is it's just so unfamiliar.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're dealing with an infection, you don't want to fool around. You don't want to.
Right.
So
Especially something acute or serious.
That's what I
Yeah.
mean. So I think
People go septic. I mean, it's
100%.
Yeah.
And so it is nothing to fool around with when you want to take care of yourself on this level.
Right.
I would say to people, start learning about it, have it available, start incorporating it.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, and I've done this with nieces and nephews, and even like my daughter-in-law, when she came into the family, she grew up in a medical family. And so all this stuff was new for her. And she's fully embraced it. She's now has worked for me for 20 years, and she's raised my 2 grandkids exactly like this. So I'm so grateful. But it took her a while to be able to trust it. And so what I've always suggested to people is when you're healthy, start incorporating some of this stuff. Start trying it out. Have a cup of holy basil tea.
Right.
Something that might be off your radar, but is so healthy and delicious, and not waiting until you have an acute
Right.
issue where you have to hit it hard, and then you have the confidence. And I always suggest people use Lomatium before they get sick.
Mm-hmm.
So because first, if you're going to get the rash, get it over with.
Right.
Then you can use it how you need it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just want to hit it hard and you're really sick, then
Yeah.
yeah.
Unfortunately, that's human nature to
Yeah.
not really do anything until there's a serious crisis or a problem.
True.
So it definitely takes a change of mindset to
I agree.
anything having to do with prevention,
agree.
right?
Well, if there's ever a time in human history, from my perspective,
Yeah.
to change your mindset
Right.
and accept radical responsibility for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
it's now.
And your children.
It's now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Well, going back to the rash,
Yeah.
the way I like to explain it to people or help people understand it is as I'm always looking at everything in the body from a design perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we've been trained, again, wrongfully, I think, that every symptom is bad. Everything that happened is bad and we need to stop it.
Yeah.
You got mucus,
Yeah.
stop the mucus. You got a cough, stop the cough. You got a fever, stop the fever. You got a rash, take a steroid, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's a
course.
big part of our system of medicine.
It is.
But what I really want people to understand is that God is a good designer of the human body, and that everything the human body does is exactly what it's supposed to be doing, because that's how God designed it to work. If we're designed in the image of God, then everything the body is doing is what it's supposed to be doing.
Right.
So if we start to understand the body and understand what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
we can actually see it as a gift. We can see it as a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
We can see it as a positive. We can work with it and not against it.
Yeah.
And would you say that's accurate for what's happening with the rash related to lomation?
100%, because it only happens once. It shows up about a week after you've been taking it. Um, and usually, well, always, people, their skin looks better and they feel completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people with really chronic issues that have just kind of been low grade, and people just think, oh, I'm just tired because I'm stressed, or they don't realize that there's something that's just been keeping them fatigued. And when you
Right.
clear that out, and it expresses in the form of this really intense rash for most people who get it, it can be really, really, it can be scary.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, especially, I mean, yours went on a long time,
Mm-hmm.
which is common for about a third of the people who get it. Most people don't get it quite that intense.
Right.
But I remember growing up, you know, when we'd get a fever, my mom and dad would just, you know, cold compresses, a cool bath. My parents
Yep.
never did anything to stop a fever.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, think about when you lose your appetite and you get a fever. Your body's telling you don't eat,
Right.
because I need to spend all my energy healing.
Mm-hmm.
And your body heats up because it's burning off infection.
Right.
Like you're so spot on with that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
our body is given this perfectly designed signal: don't eat. I'm going to heat up,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to help you heal.
Right.
But instead, what we do is we suppress the fever,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to eat something.
Right. You
And
got to eat to get well.
right, and
Right.
it's the complete opposite. And
Right.
I'm always surprised when people uh, are afraid to not eat, because
Mm-hmm.
I think fasting is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, what if I mess up my metabolism? What
Right.
if I, you know, I don't know. I've never skipped a couple meals,
Mm-hmm.
or like
Never skipped a meal in their life, maybe.
right, right. And for me, I'll do like once a year. I try to do a 7-day fast,
Yeah.
and people are just like, how are you still alive?
Right.
I'm just like, well, that's the reason I'm still alive
Yeah,
and still
exactly.
really, really, really healthy, is
Mm-hmm.
because I give my body a break. It goes into autophagy, which is basically cancer cell death, and your
Right.
body's cleaning out old cells,
Totally.
and everything gets to repair and regenerate. And I feel like $1,000,000 when I'm
Yes.
fasting. I
Totally.
sleep good. Everything is clear.
Yes.
So I think that we just need to swap our mindset.
Mm-hmm.
You're so spot on with that.
Yeah, my experience, I mean, I've done whole series on fasting.
Yeah,
I'm big
yeah,
on fasting. I've
yeah.
done a 40-day water fast, 40-day juice
Okay.
fast. But I always tell people, it's amazing how, for me, every time you're fourth, fifth day
Yeah.
into a fast, how it's all of a sudden you're like
Bing.
all your senses are more acute. You're like, oh, I see better.
Yeah.
I smell better. I'm more aware.
Right.
Like
The
everything
mental clarity
changes.
is crazy, right?
The mental
Yeah.
clarity is ridiculous. So what that shows is that
Mhm.
clearly the food we're eating and all the things going into our body are causing a dullness
Yeah.
of our senses.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
imagine the power of like actually educating humanity that through eating less food,
Mm-hmm.
eating the right food,
Mm-hmm.
taking the right medicine,
Mm-hmm.
or what I say is just going back to God's way from the beginning.
I
Going
agree.
back to the Garden of Eden, going back to the ancient path, going back to the way God designed us to live on this earth.
Yeah.
Even in a broken world, can we still find that?
Oh, I think it's actually more important that we do. And I think that people need to realize it's not complicated.
Right.
It's actually very, very easy. I think we've complicated our health.
Yeah.
We've divided, all the doctors are now divided into specialties.
Right.
And they're not treating you as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying, you know, I mean, I talk to people who've seen 10 specialists and they still can't figure out what's wrong with the person.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like,
That's crazy.
it is crazy. So I think, you know, one of the biggest things people need to realize is that we are created so perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
and that health is very simple, and it's our birthright.
Yes.
Wellness is our birthright.
Wow.
And then you have to say, okay, I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to have faith in the way my body knows how to heal. And this is where belief systems come in. You can believe. There's not only the placebo effect, but there's the nocebo effect. If you believe something, it's like when someone gets diagnosed with cancer and the doctor says you have 3 months to live.
Right.
People usually will die within a few weeks or whatever of the diagnosis they've gotten.
Because they believe the diagnosis.
Because they believe it. In fact,
Right.
I have a really interesting story. About 15 years ago, I got a call from a man who was looking for a cancer protocol for his daughter. She was 30 years old, and her breast cancer had come back, and she'd done everything in the medical community. And what he told me is that when she was 9, her mother died of breast cancer. So here's this little 9-year-old at her mother's funeral, and apparently the mother's sister, the mother's mom, and her grandmother had all died of this same breast cancer.
Wow.
So all the people at the funeral are saying, and they're not really realizing the impact they're having on this 9-year-old, but they're saying all of the women in our family die from breast cancer. Isn't this the saddest thing that this happens?
Right.
So he said the day I took her home from her mom's funeral, that became her mantra.
Yeah.
Is that all the women in our family die from breast cancer. So when she was 18 years old, she developed breast cancer. And she went through all the stuff. She had a double mastectomy. She went through all the chemo. She went through everything. And she went into remission in her 20s for a while, but her mantra never changed. Her fear mindset of belief that all the women die from this in our family was so deep in her belief system that she couldn't break out of it, and it came back when she was 30.
Oh, no.
And the doctor said, we have a few things we can do for you, but you've already done everything. So he was really desperate at that point, and he got our protocol, but she passed away 6 months later.
Man.
So
sad.
We need to realize that these belief systems have kept us in this mind. Like this is by design, unfortunately, to keep us afraid if we don't do this and we don't do that. In fact, I met a doctor down in California probably 15 years ago, and he spent the first 30 years of his career as an oncologist, and then his wife developed some type of cancer, and he didn't want to do the treatments.
Wow.
So he reached out, and he actually cured her naturally. And then he went back to school and became a naturopath.
Wow, that's awesome.
And that's when I met him. He was actually in his 80s when I met him.
Wow, that's cool.
And he has now since passed on. But he told me that when he was in oncology school, one of the classes they took was how to talk patients into toxic treatments that they intuitively knew they didn't want to take.
That was a class he had to take.
That was a class that he took. And because he said people intuitively know that they don't want to do some of these treatments.
Right.
And so he said, this is you, but they're like, you need to, because it's going to save their life. So here's this is how you need to convince people to do these treatments. Yeah. And of course, having been out of it, it was like, he was like, I can't believe, so it's interesting.
It's sad. Well, at the same time as you tell that tragic story of, what happened to that gal, I believe you have dozens of stories of the opposite.
Many, many, many more. Because people have epiphanies, they have revelations, they have the divine inspiration from higher power, and then they just simply have that human intuition that goes, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What if what I've been thinking and learning and what I was taught through my family, my culture, or whatever, what if something's off there?
Yeah.
And they tune into that piece of them that is God, and they go, I think God would want me well.
Right.
Like, why would
Amen.
because then I can be of service. I can live the life I'm supposed to live. That resonates deep within them, and they go, that makes so much more sense. And then when the belief systems fall away that don't serve you, those beautiful belief systems come in that make so much sense and resonate with you that your body just it's surprising how fast wellness comes to you, no matter what you have.
Right.
No matter what you have.
Right.
Almost like miraculous, spontaneous healing. And people are like, wow.
It's almost like it starts with faith.
Of course it does.
Because our faith is so important.
Yeah.
And everybody has faith.
Yeah.
And you're believing in something.
Yeah.
So they're believing in pharmaceutical drugs and this
Yeah.
man-made system and that the chemo's going to work.
People get well from that, from the
Right.
believing in that
So
too.
you can believe that.
For sure.
Right? Or
For
you
sure.
can believe in the power of the mind, or you can believe in plant medicine, but we're all believing in something.
Agreed.
Right?
Of course.
And so it comes down to like our worldview and how we were raised and education and, you know, actually what choices we make.
Yeah. And we have to be open-minded too.
Yeah.
Because I really do believe we get so caught in what we've been taught that it's difficult to break out of that because we've got this ego. And what if our ego said, oh, I've been wrong all these years? But here's one thing I really love. I think the highest sign of intelligence is when you get new information and you have the ability to change your mind.
Yeah.
That is what's called high intelligence, because when we're all learning, I think until the day we take our last breath, we're still learning. We don't know everything. But the highest sign of intelligence is being able to change your mind when you get new information. That means there's intelligence working.
Especially as you get older.
Yeah. It actually gets easier when you get older and you've been able to release some of these things and you go, oh, it doesn't really matter if I believed this way a decade ago.
Right.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And if other people, I've really come to the point where, and everybody says this as they get older, but you really start to realize it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of me. The way, I've had friends make fun of me for taking herbs instead of taking the flu shot every year.
Right.
And now that
you're a hippie.
Yeah, I am. Okay. And honestly, I take it. I take it as a compliment too. It's like, oh, okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe as we end, get towards the end of this episode, because we're going to do another one together, and I really want to share some really powerful testimonies from people of what you've seen. I'll share some of what I've seen because I really think it's important to encourage people.
Oh, I do
like
too.
We can talk about these things and that they're real and, oh, you should try plant medicine and, how it's different than pharmaceutical drugs and how the systems are different. We can talk about all those things philosophically, but to give real stories and because I think there's power in the testimony.
Oh, for sure.
So I think
agree.
At the end here, I'm going to share a little bit. I'd like you to share a little bit. We'll kind of end with this.
Okay.
But I want to tell people the truth. Okay? The truth is your body can heal itself.
Yeah.
You can heal from anything.
I agree.
I don't care how bad it is, how bad the diagnosis is from the doctor, if it's the worst of the worst cancer, that your body can heal itself. I always tell people I'm working with, if you're still breathing, your body can heal itself.
Yeah.
Like God and how he designed the body is that good.
Yeah.
So everybody should have hope. Everybody should know that there's answers, there's solutions. If it's the scary autoimmune disease, if it's been in your family for 4 generations, or if it's a little, God forbid, it happens, little babies.
Yeah.
Innocent little 1, 2, 3-year-old children diagnosed with cancer and autoimmune diseases. It's happening. Didn't happen 2 generations ago.
Right.
Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? But I want people to know the truth that anything can be healed because God is good, right? If we are empowered, educated on the right things to help people.
No, I completely agree with you. And, I would add to that just reiterate, it's not complicated. We need to remember that it's our birthright to be well. And I think getting out of the fear is the most important thing because we are afraid to not go do this test or that test.
Right.
We're afraid to not do what the doctor says. And, for me, I'm a little bit like, I don't want to get trapped in the system. I'm more afraid of getting caught in the system than I am taking care of my own health. So, I think that some of these realizations can drop into people pretty quickly, even just listening to what you just said, is this is how we're designed and our body can heal from anything. And I've seen and heard stories of some really, really beautiful things that even surprises the person.
Yes.
And they just kind of are like, uh, I don't know how this happened, and they're stunned.
Yeah.
And it's really, really beautiful. So I
It's a
think
miracle.
and it is a miracle.
Yeah.
But and again, it's how we're designed is to accept miracles every single day,
Yeah. Amen.
every day.
Amen. Well, thank you for joining us on
Thank
this
you.
podcast. Look forward to doing it again with you sometime.
Thank you, Vaughn.
Okay.